A foreign messenger stumbles his way into the feasting hall. The jubilant crowd of this pirate nobility falls to a hum. The messenger clears his tarried throat and proclaims, "I am sent from Zuzan, king of the Folok." The concourse of men shift around, giving the messenger full sight of the illustrious head of the table. "I am listening," says Aric, ruler of the Metaxagus Sea.
Acre.
Welcome to today's episode of Killter Chronicles, wherein we continue to follow King Aric and his Valens' terrifying rise to power in the Metaxagus Sea. Last episode, the option was given for you to decide the choice of King Aric, to continue with his plan of invading Cadenia, or accepting the potentially providential proposal of King Zuzan of the Folok and taking back Zacaria from the Visisoms. As the community has decided, so shall it be done. And remember to watch until the end of this episode to see what to vote on next. Without any further ado, let the chronicling continue. The year was 480. It had only been 8 years since the mercenary tribes betrayed Respa following the Empire's Pyrrhic victory in the Battle of Natrim. In that time, King Aric had led the Valens out of their former land grant in southern Zacaria, across the wider western Metaxagus Sea, and northern Akros. The Valens had gone from being one of the weakest tribes under Respa to becoming the wealthiest of the former tribes, and the biggest threat to the remains of Respa in the east. While the events that led to the meteoric rise of the Valens could be viewed as lucky, Aric only saw the hand of God. From the moment the Valens left Zacaria, Aric would occasionally receive visions from past spiritual leaders or some form of mystical symbolism. These visions had the tendency to leave Aric bedridden for a week or two, but most importantly, fueling his ardent zealotry for the Phyrian cause. Aric had devoted his reign to the expansion of Phyrian Kilnistism, and by extension the Valens. As Aric saw his own kingdom as the seed of God's heavenly kingdom on earth that would grow to unite all the different Kilnis sects and replace the old Respin Empire. A major step in this was refilling the Patris' seat in Olco with Bishop Killter. You see, early Kilnistism functioned around these Patrasi. You can think of them as the 7 kings of Kilnistism, all sort of ruling the religion jointly. The idea was that they would keep each other in check by correcting one another's teachings to make sure that it all conformed and was true doctrine. And if one of the Patrasi preached heresy and did not accept correction, their seat would be vacated, and the other 6 would get the Respin Emperor to banish the heretic, and a new Patrasi would be elected in the former one's stead. This system worked for the first couple centuries. Over time, the Patrasi seats evolved, and each furthered their respective influence in whichever region they governed. Couple this with the later Respin Emperor's lack of will to rock the boat too much, and it became harder and harder to vacate and refill the seats. By the time Aric personally filled the seat in Olco, it had been vacant for over 50 years. Due to the inability to agree on a new Patris, them attempting to rein in the Patris of Respa, who started acting like their seat was more important, as well as the seat of Riquet, vacating for the Keptic heresy in the same time frame. With all this being said, Bishop Killter's ascension to a Patris was a foundational step in legitimizing the Phyrians. Now, the grand strategy of Aric to accomplish his goal was fairly straightforward. Keep pushing east. While the west mostly fell, the east still stood, albeit in a very weakened state. While the Valens destroyed the Respin navy in 475, they too were badly wounded from their war against the Ostrosoms in Bechia, so no real push could be made. The Valens were also a very disorganized bunch, which made it almost impossible for them to conquer lands from the both very organized and heavily fortified eastern Respins. Aric attempted to solve this discrepancy in the years following, until 480, by swaying the nobility, or Baitan, as they were known, with religious influence, inclusion in special feasts, or some basic gifts, along with further organizing the Valens through increasing the loyalty of the Baitan. Aric also constructed his own personal navy to combat the fact that the Valen navy was completely split between the various Baitan families. On a less historically important, but visually important note, it was in this royal navy that the first semblance of a Valen flag was used. It featured a red field within a yellow charge of a four-pointed star in the shape of a sideways cross, with two Kayeti in each corner of the fly side. The Kayeti is a symbol merging the first two letters of Kiln, Kai, and Yeti together. These flags marked a ship as personal property of Aric. By 480, Aric had brought the Valens into a much more actionable state, and he felt that they were finally able to strike east. Before any fleets could sail off, however, Aric received an intriguing offer from Zuzan, king of the Folok. The Folok were a tribe from the northern mountains in Zacaria. They had been mostly ignored by the Respins and the Vizisoms after them, and so they maintained their own independence, but I digress. Zuzan was offering to split Zacaria between the Folok and the Valens in a joint campaign against the Vizisoms. And along with this, Zuzan was pledging to convert the Folok to Phyrianism and recognize Killter's position as Patras of Olco. Aric was conflicted on this offer. He felt that returning to Zacaria could be done after the East was secured, and that the East would recover eventually, so wasting time elsewhere could prove a fatal blow to the Valens' grand strategy. Aric could also see the providence in the offer, accepting it would hopefully allow for a more secure position in the region, especially without a threat like the Vizisoms, and with an ally in the west. Ultimately, Aric would visit Killter before announcing his decision, seeking divine guidance. Though a religious figure, Killter did hold ambitions of his own. With increased support from an outside Phyrian kingdom, Killter believed he might be able to leverage his position more as a Patras rather than as a puppet of Aric. So the choice was clear to Killter, and he assured Aric that God's blessing was surely upon the invasion of Zacaria. With the decision made, Aric was quick to send the messenger back to Zuzan with a small entourage of Phyrian teachers and gold as a show of good faith. The Valens were quick to gather themselves together for war, and little more than a week from accepting the offer, they were off. In classic Valen fashion, instead of stocking up on food from their own supply, they made sure to parade themselves up the western coast of Behia, raiding towns for food and new Chaldean slaves. Once their stocks were topped off, the Valens turned sails towards the island of Ibarra, off the coast of Zacaria. This island was extremely important to Aric. It was where the Valens first fled from the Vizisoms, and more so, where Aric began to receive his visions. Perhaps feeling the sanctity of this place and his memories, Aric declared an impromptu religious festival. We don't know much at all about what went on here, besides Aric claiming to have more visions and good omens for their invasion of Zacaria. It would seem that this experience brought Aric into a sort of craze. Swept up in the moment, the Valens set off for Zacaria in the early morning the following day. The Folok were not made aware of the invasion starting. It's also unlikely that they knew the Valens were in Ibarra in the first place. No plans of any sort had been drawn up between the two powers. For the time being, all the Folok knew was the Valens had accepted the offer and were heading off shortly. To make matters worse for the Folok, Aric was heading south to the Valens' old capital, one the opposite end of the peninsula from the Folok. While a ballsy move for sure, the Vizisoms were an exhausted force. They had just earlier this year ended their roughly 8-year-long war against Gestia to the north. So I suppose the idea, if there even was one, was that Vareth would take a while to raise an army to contest Aric. In any case, the invasion began without a hitch. Upon entering the bay, the Valens flooded the Zacarian Peninsula. Aric himself would set siege to his former capital, as many of the Baitan led smaller forces to subdue the countryside. News of the Valens' attacks eventually reached both Zuzan and Vareth. The Folok were already in a fairly ready state, so in little time Zuzan would lead them out of their mountain kingdom and toward the Zacarian coasts. Vareth, on the other hand, was forced into the unenviable position of convincing his men to raise arms once again. While Vareth didn't have much remaining wealth after his failed campaign against Gestia, he and his men could see that they were backed into a bit of a corner. As inspirational as Vareth was, he struggled to convince his men to fight for him without making large promises. Vareth forced himself into a nigh lose-lose situation. If he lost the war, the Vizisoms would be destroyed. If he won, but didn't recover enough wealth from the defeated Valens, the Vizisoms would have him overthrown. I would like to pause for a moment, just to stress that this situation was completely at the fault of Varith. He was the one who first betrayed Respa and set in motion the dominoes that led to the other tribes doing likewise. He was the one that got the Valens out of Zacaria in the first place and put them in the position to become the pirate kings of the Metaxasia Sea. He was also the one who forced the Vizisoms into a very costly and inconclusive war against Gestia, which left the Vizisoms vulnerable to any potential foreign power that might want to come back home. By the time Varith's army was ready, much of the south had completely fallen to the Valens, and the east to the Folok. For now, though, the two invaders remained split. Varith had the opportunity to focus his efforts on either the Valens or the Folok. The Valens' naval might meant nothing on the land, and defeating them in battle could provide some much-needed loot to pay Varith's soldiers, assuming they had brought any of their riches with them. The Folok were much smaller than the Valens, however, so a decisive victory against them could push them out of the war entirely, giving the Vizisoms an improved position. And so now is the time for you to choose which direction the Vizisoms will go in the next episode of Killter Chronicles. Be sure to cast your vote in the corresponding poll in the community post tabs to decide the fate of Varith's Vizisoms.